Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do a voiceover for each exercise. And we can start with what I like to call flat band manipulation. And this is kind of to activate the rhomboids. The rhomboids are what allows our scapula or the shoulder blades to retract. I consider all of the major joints a part of our core. Alright, so the shoulder, least stable joint in the body, it needs to be strong. Even if you're just warming up, I highly recommend at least the flat band. You can use a loop band, you can use a tube band. As you can see, I'm doing like internal rotations of the shoulder, and you can do it from different angles. I throw the football, or if you're like simulating a knee strike, you know, you're loading the hips, so I'll simulate loading the hips. And we do the same when we throw a football, baseball, when we throw a punch, whatever the case. Alright, so we're just neuromuscularly activating, or a fancy way of saying warming up, right? But the thing is these type of exercises are going to be used especially with active recovery. For example, if you're in the middle of like a 12 or 16 week workout program, or let's say you've been working out for 6 months straight and you know your body's burned out and you need a break from it. You're starting to develop, like, you know, maybe a chronic fatigue in certain areas, and we need some recovery. So in the meantime, we're going to want to keep those muscles activated and maintain as much bone density and muscle density as possible in our recovery time, right? So for this, I'm going to be doing a clock lunge from the diagonal and then the side, and then rear diagonal. And with this exercise, I like to stay squared up to the camera. So even when I go back diagonal here, I try to stay squared. So, you know, in terms of balance and core strength, these go hand in hand. They're two of the foundational principles of I Motivate Me. So it's on the website. But I'll do a couple of rotations here. Normally I'll do in between 3 and 4 rotations around the clock. I just did 2 there to complete each set. And what I like to do is pair these up. Alright, so we're doing some hip flexion, hip extension, and so we can go straight from the clock lunge to like the ab wheel. In the ab wheel, you know, obviously we're extending the abdominal area, the shoulders, with our knees anchored. And as you can see, I was giving the proper way. We want to keep that back straight. We don't want to concave our back. It's where our pelvic area would tilt towards the ground. We don't want that. And then this is just a modified version, a more intense version. It does put some pressure on the lower back. I don't recommend doing too many of these too often. I might do these once a week during like a 12-week program or something like that. Once or twice a week, I may do 3 sets of like 8 to 10. It doesn't take much. Obviously, going straight from there, we can do a push-up. Alright, we modify it, we change up the wide stance or wide grip to narrow grip. We can target different areas of the pectoralis muscle groups, the deltoids. That's kind of like my basic wrestler type fighting stance, and I like to be balanced like that. I like to be down on the ground like so. If I want to do some kind of mountain climber like that, it's kind of a planking position. Very similarly, I can do this to implement the dive bomber. And so what you're seeing is hip flexion, hip extension. We're going under a rope and then back over, under it, and coming up, under and coming up. Alright, so we're extending the hips, flexing the hips, extending the knees, flexing the knees. There's shoulder movement, tricep extension, pec movement, deltoid, trapezius movement, all those things. And so we're targeting the same muscle groups essentially in the midsection. And so again, you know, pairing these up together. So what I'm going to do is I'll do 1 set or 1 rotation of the clock lunge. Right, going forward diagonal. And then we might go straight into like a jump lunge. And these are great for balance. You know, I like to make a rule where if I lose my balance, I've got to start at the last number or count 2 back and do 2 more than what I would have done. Right? I like to use the ab wheel as kind of a weighted item. So if you've got like a dumbbell, if you've got a weighted pack, I might put 25 or 30 pounds in the pack, grab the pack, and I might do 10 above my head, 10 at the chest height. Alright, then we can switch up, and I'll switch to the side view here. And we're just twisting the midsection while maintaining a lunge pose. So we're doing time under tension with the different muscle groups in the hips, the knees, so with the quadriceps, the glutes, the hamstrings, the calves, all of the smaller muscle groups in the ankle. All of those are firing, all of those are being worked. That's part of your balance, that's part of your core strength. Alright, and I like to go straight into a flat back torso twist. Alright, so we lay on the ground. We want to make sure that our belly button is going to be pressing down into the ground. If our legs are straight like so, that makes it more difficult depending on what your range of motion is for your hips, for your lower back in terms of your torso twist. If we have ailments, we can, if we have ailments, we can modify this, bending the knees, or later on I'll show you a resistance band anchored torso twist instead. A little less intense, but it's an alternative to doing this if we have lower back issues, if we have hip issues, whatever the case that may exclude us from doing this exercise. All right, so we keep that back straight and we twist, and we can do 3 sets of, you know, I would do 20, so 10 each way. All right, so for here, I'm using my own personal bands. I'm not using the iMotivate Me bands, but basically this is going to be, we're going to isolate the bicep, or it's an isometric bicep curl, so we curl it and don't move, and then we, instead of flexing at the elbow, we're going to perform a squat. Right, so as we squat up, obviously the resistance on the band is going to increase, and so we're working our biceps, but we're also working the hip flexors, the hip extenders, the quadriceps, the glutes, the hamstrings. All right, we want to make sure that bottom is parallel to the ground when we go down, keeping our knees above our toes, not hanging too far beyond. Weight on our heels, and we finish up. Usually I like to include this with another exercise because we'll have already fatigued some of these muscles doing an exercise prior, and then I like to do like 5 or 6 or 8 bicep curls because they're already fatigued. So we're going to continue to work through fatigue to not only improve muscular strength but muscular endurance as well. All right, and so this is perfect stuff. The toe touch, for whatever reason I did not demonstrate a side crunch after this, but we can do side crunches either way on both sides. But we want to be able to reach up. Notice putting my legs straight out like that puts a lot of undue pressure and stress on the lower back. I don't like to do that, but we want to reach up there and touch those toes. And with that, we can roll right over and get into another planking exercise. I call this the spider crawl or the Spider-Man walk, whatever you want to call it. And basically, we're going to stagger, and then stagger, and stagger, and stagger. And we can do it a slow pace. I like to kind of train it like a little more high explosive, intensity level. But we can do it nice and slow to work on our time under tension with our muscles. And that's a great core strength exercise, and it coordinates. So we're doing core strength and we're doing cognitive movements that require thinking. In essence, you got to coordinate yourself. And then my bread and butter, this is mandatory, man. This is going to be it. So the hip manipulation, this is what I like to do in the middle of exercises. I'll do 15 of each way. So I just did the hip abduction while sitting or standing rather on one foot. I'll stay on that same foot and perform the hip flexion and extension like so. Doesn't seem like much, and it looks like we're moving that left leg and we're thus working out the left leg, but in reality we're actually working out that stationary leg. Alright, so right now the right leg's moving, but the left leg that's anchored is actually, you've got a lot of like balancing and core muscles that are trying to keep your body from falling over even when we are shifting our body weight. And so that's kind of the philosophy of this. And what I like to do is improve my cognitive by doing this exercise as a superset or circuit set in a workout, so that when I'm tired, this is kind of my break. And I can stand on like a Bosu ball, for example, and do the same exercise. And I'm focusing on not, falling over and keeping my balance is very important. And then this one, we're going to anchor the resistance band. There are multiple ways you can anchor the band. You can do a single anchor like this, or double wrap it and make the intensity in the resistance band more sturdy, more resistant, more heavy. Alright, so basically we can chop our feet, keeping them shoulder width apart, and we're just basically going to rotate and extend. You can rotate and extend. So we're going to twist and extend. Twist and then extend. And so we're working deltoids, trapezius, we're working the obliques, we're working the rhomboids minorly in the back. And certainly we are working just the muscles that are required in the hips, the piriformis minorly, so you've got the rear deltoids, superior deltoids like I just pointed out. I'm only going to do one side here. All you have to do is switch it up. I didn't feel it necessary to do a complete set, but you get the picture of each size. So you can do different modifications depending on what you feel like doing. Whatever you're targeting, if you want to add on or subtract the shoulder and the arm extension after you do the twist, then that's fine too. And you'll see here as I did the double anchor here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my face with the front of my chest, and I'm going to keep those hands in. Notice I'm not extending the hands now, I'm keeping them with the midsection, and I'm twisting the midsection. So I'm going to twist it by about 30, maybe 30 to 40 to 50 degrees. Alright, I'm going to take my face with it. So we're not going to keep our head on a swivel, but we take our face and our nose with the front of our chest. Right, so I'll go ahead and get unconfused here. And this is going to be like an external rotation of the shoulder, alright? And so I can just switch up the length of the resistance band depending on how heavy I want the band. And we just perform an external rotation of the shoulder. And then we can switch it up, do an internal rotation with the left arm, which I'll do shortly, and then we can turn in the other direction and perform the opposite on each arm. And I'll do 2 to 3 sets of these. These are mandatory for me in terms of core strength. The shoulders have to be strong, number one, and the older we get, the more susceptible we are to shoulder injuries, especially women, but men too. With the older we get, we tend to continue doing a lot of the same jobs, and we like to be thrill seekers at basic things, and especially if we like to push ourselves and we're working hard and traveling around and everything, we want to make sure that those joints are as stable as possible. Alright, so we can change it up. We can do an abduction, like a shoulder abduction, where, as you can see, I've got my arm in the air, my elbows away from the midline of my body, so we call that an abduction. And so we're just going to be doing an internal rotation from that angle, and I like to change up the angles of the shoulder. So those are just a few exercises.
A basic, let's call it a blaster demo, and it's the first of its kind, so bear with the audio, bear with the quality, just get through it. It's just going to consist of a number of workouts, to be honest with you. I put a list together, and then I went ahead and executed it. I'm pretty sure I went pretty much, not in order, but everything that I wanted to cover, from the hips, the pelvic area, balance and core strength are, foundational principles of I Motivate Me. If you go to the website, I talk a lot about that. But so we wanted to focus mainly with the hips, the basic joints, the shoulder, whether or not we are currently in some kind of workout phase or whatever the case, we're busy at work, it's the winter, energy's a little bit down or whatever, we want to maintain joint stability, especially if we're using our arms and hands to work and things in our line of work. So in any case, pelvic, shoulders, knee flexion. We spend a little bit of time in this exercise routine with like lunge poses or clock lunges, where I am using different directions to basically stimulate activation, neurological motor neuron activation in different angles, because our muscles kind of they have like a direction that they pull in. We call these vector angles, and so we want to hit different angles. A lot of times we are imbalanced with life. Life doesn't always throw balance your way, so we want to make sure we get every angle. That's kind of the philosophy there. So from the ground up, a foundational principle of balance and core strength. We did some flat back, where we lay flat on our backs and we conduct kind of like a windshield wiper motion. There are many different names for what it is, but I just basically call it a flat back torso twist, where my legs are more straight. That creates a little more resistance, or we can bend the legs. We want to make sure that we're not putting any undue pressure on the lower back and these type of things. So this is kind of like foundational exercises. Basically, you could call it like active recovery, if you will. So, if you're not doing some kind of hardcore exercise routine, here goes got the commuter rail. So, in the event that we find ourselves in between training regimen, this is a great opportunity to keep those neurons stimulated, all right, so that we reduce our risk of injury when we decide to get back into the gym, and we are maintaining our bone density as much as possible. We're maintaining the bone density and fat-free mass more so than a person who decides to be sedentary for the entire time when they are in active recovery or some kind of recovery phase or something. All right, we should always be active, and these exercises can just be like a foundation for anybody. It doesn't matter what athlete you are. I think they hit pretty much the basics, and then for future reference, if I ever threw any other things in, I would just make them more difficult by doing like a one-legged squat or something like that, and they would just get more challenging, and you would have to improve and hone those balance and core strength skills a little more by increasing the number of repetitions, increasing the number of sets, and increasing the frequency of our workout days. And that gets back into more of focused training regimen, and then you can execute it any way that you choose. So, all right, man, I hope these work out for you. God bless, stay motivated, and have a good one.